inflation, deflation, Chrisflation, and humiliation. Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Mrs. 4 here. Today I am back to cover Dragonic, Kaiser, Vermillion. Again, I'm really happy to be able to have the time to go through this. As you guys know from my previous video, I'm really busy at school. I actually have an exam tomorrow. But today I'm actually taking a bit of time off to show you something I've been working on the side, which is my Dragonic Kaiser Vermillion. Now, this is D-Series, as you probably can guess, because Vermillion has just been added to D-Series with DBT11 Clash of the Heroes. It's a reference to BT09, but beyond that, I want to talk about it. Now, this set has really crashed in terms of prices because people are going ham on the good stuff, and there's some really good stuff in this set, and Vermillion is not one of them. Totally not. People have overpriced this thing and it has dropped to hell because this deck is not good. But it is a pretty decent foundation that we can definitely work with. Encounter decks, as you know, historically always get a magazine promo or a tournament promo, and then eventually they will receive their relevant cross rights further down the line. With Ezel, Vermillion, and Maelstrom all existing in D-Series at this point of recording, it's safe to say that we will receive Platina, the Blood, and Glory respectively in DBT14. So you can mark down your calendars because you've been warned. You're welcome. So let's actually talk about Dragonic Kaiser Vermillion right now in BT11. He's not that bad. He's certainly much worse than Gandiva, but he's actually still operational. He's very unique. A lot of his old skills were removed because they are too similar to Clarissa from D-Series, who is a premier control deck, by the way. But Vermillion still keeps some essence of originality and is still pretty fun to play. I must admit, I've been having quite a blast playing him, and he's not that expensive. So if you're looking for a tier 3 to 4 deck to play to have fun, and it's Dragon Empire, or you just really love Asia Circuit or Narukami, then you may want to pick this up. You may, because, you know, if you want to win, then just play Gandiva. So moving on to our right deck, we obviously play Spark Kid Dragoon as our starter. I am personally very upset that we did not get Lizard Soldier Saishin, but you know what? Never mind, we can't always get what we want in life, right? Our grade 1 is our faithful Red River Dragoon. Red River Dragoon, when rode upon by grade 2 Narukami, you can search the top. You can search your entire deck for an Eternal Thunderbolt and then add it to your hand. Now, the text on it says Eternal Thunderbolt, but in actuality, the characters on the card actually read something a bit different. It's more like Eternal Crimson Thunderbolt, which is really nice. You know, it's a reference to Dragon Kaiser Crimson, how, you know, in the lore there's a lot more implications regarding Vermillion's death, and it's nice that in terms of encountering or, you know, going through Kra's lore, it's still clear that they don't actually know what happened, but we do. We know that he committed suicide. So I'll get into this card later on eventually, but yeah, I just wanted to show you that that's what you search for. His other skill, which is also relevant in his deck, is that, you know, when he boosts, if your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater Narukami, grade 3 or greater, are we getting Stunverse? Please save Stunverse, okay? You get to Counterblast 1, choose one of your opponent's back row rear guards and bind it. Yeah, bind, damn! And then after that, if you can't, use Soul Charge 2. Very interesting card. I think this was the first one they revealed for Naru during the stream, and I was personally taken aback to see Soul Charge and a bind. So this sets the precedent in terms of how we're going to be talking about Narukami, is that we are getting bind back, hard bind. So Celestial, get out. But we also get Soul Charge, which means there are skills in this deck that use Soul Charge. And we see more in the form of Thunderstorm Dragoon, a good friend of mine. Thunderstorm Dragoon looking really good as always. If you watch the animation trailer for BT11, wow, they animated this out so well. Wow, okay, when rode upon by a grade 3 Narukami, which means you can also use the blood in the future, okay? So, Kidani, I'm doing your work for you. Take your notes, okay? When rode upon by a grade 3 Narukami, look at the top 7 cards of your deck. Look for a Narukami clan unit or an Eternal Thunderbolt and add it to the hand. So, again, mention of that order, we'll get to that later. But other than that though, his second skill is just when placed on rearguard, if you have a Vanguard with Narukami, you Soul Charge 1 and he gains 5,000 power. Now it's not restricted, so you can actually early aggro with Thunderstorm Dragoon, which is not a bad idea if you are playing more copies of him in the main deck. My only downside is it's an on place +5. I know Dragon Empire has a lot of grade 2 10k attackers that turn into 15k, but I don't know if this is worth the slot, to be honest, but it's a good budget option. So if you want to play more copies of Thunderstorm Dragoon, I just want to read to you the whole skill so you're aware. Premium wise, even though I'm never playing premium until they address P and V, the P and V collection with that horrible set with all these erratas, I think they're pretty okay in premium, but that's only if you actually need a soul in premium, which you don't much, but maybe for Kaisers you may, because you may want to soul charge a Kaiser like Crimson or something. But that's really unlikely because you're more rather than not likely to play in premium the new Dragonic Kaiser Vermillion. 2 skills, once per turn, counterblast 1, choose 2 of your Narukami units and they gain 5000 power. When this unit attacks, you can choose 2 of your opponent's rearguards to battle alongside your opponent's Vanguard. It is a very different wording to the skill of Vermillion that we all know and love, which is to strike the whole front row. It took me aback. I say this for real. This phrasing really took me aback. Because it specifies your opponent's Vanguard and then 2 other rearguards. So that means you can now strike the back row now, like, you know, Brawlers, Clarissa. Okay, it helps Vermillion stay relevant because, you know, in case your opponent's playing some form of evasion deck, or if he's playing Blondazzle, for God's sake, I want a way to counter him. But it's still not bad. The plus 5k to 2 units is appreciated because most of your deck is supposed to be Narukami. Vermillion himself is Narukami, so you can actually give him 5k and then someone else, which is nice because Vermillion struggles with numbers, so the fact that I can get a plus 5k to 2 units on demand is nice. But his second skill is not very nice. At the end of the battle, this unit attacks. If you cast the normal order this turn, choose a card from your hand, discard it. Choose my opponent's Vanguards. If they have 4 less damage, you deal them 1. Yeah, it's a -1 to deal 1, and a lot of people, when they first read this, were like, oh, I'm going to inflate Vermillion, it's really good. Spoilers, -1 to give your EVA opponent a +1 counterblast isn't exactly smart, but you know what, it's not a bad skill. This is a very unique take on Vermillion to just straight away deal direct damage. Last time Narukami had a direct dealing damage boss, probably VMAX. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting that they would do this for Vermillion, and I like it. It's restricted enough that it's not overpowered at all, but it's flavorful enough that it's fun, but you have to know when to actually use this skill. You don't just want to keep discarding cards for the fun of it and dealing your opponent damage because that gives them counterblast. Not what you want to do. But other than that, I would say it's actually pretty interesting because if you push them to 4 damage, you strike them down to 5, every attack from now on is lethal. Vermillion cannot multi-attack. I'll just tell you that first. If you're one of those few people who still believe that Rising Phoenix is a multi-attacker, I'm gonna tell you first, no, it's really hard to pull off this multi-attack. But if not, it's still pretty nice to have 2 attacks almost dealing lethal damage once your opponent is at 5 damage. But notice that trigger effects are not negated when he deals the damage, which means if your opponent straight up pulls an over trigger, a draw trigger, a heal trigger, something, you gave that to them at a -1. So do actually know when to use the skill. I know most people don't really care about that, but I would say at high levels of play, you should certainly know when to use the skill and when not to. Even though bringing Vermillion to high levels of play is, in my opinion, a mistake, first and foremost. But I'm just saying, if you would like to, please take note. Moving on to our grade 3s. Our grade 3s, we obviously play 4 copies of Dragonic Kaiser Vermillion with 1 in the right deck, and then we play 4 copies of Eternal Thunderbolt. I just feel really happy that for the first time in a long time in Dragon Empire, I can play a deck that does not need that much grade 3s. I recently just sold my Gandiva, and I can tell you, I don't know why, it's like Shoujo Doji, Megalazuchi, you know, what's the guy's name? Eugene is like, why do we need so many grade 3s in Dragon Empire when half of my clan is grade 2 15k attackers? Kidani, thank you for listening. So, we are playing 4 copies of Vermillion because the Persona Rite is important. I do not need to say anything else about it, but we don't play the Regalis piece of card because we really need to use this, and I'll explain this more in detail. So, for our order, we have Eternal Thunderbolt, which I mentioned just now in the right deck, that this is a card that you can search. It is very important, this deck. If you do not have enough copies of Eternal Thunderbolt, you definitely need to pick them up. If not, just don't play this deck. This is the most important card. Okay? So, I'm going to explain this to you real quick because it's an interesting card that you've seen before. Yes. So, you play this if your Vanguard is a Vermillion and is the Narukami unit. So, you know, this guy. or you can play it with potentially the blood, but this means that you cannot play it with crimson, you cannot play it with other stuff because it specifically states Vermillion, not Kaiser. So just do keep in mind that that's an actual restriction if you are interested in playing this in premium, or if this video becomes 6 years old and we have crimson by then, whatever. Your Vanguard gets 2 skills. Your first skill that he obtains is that any unit that this opponent battles, if it's retired, it's bound instead, which means that Vermillion, when he battles your opponent's rearguards, if they successfully pass away, they are bound instead of retired. So this is the skill that Vermillion does not have on his card decks, but he gets only from playing this order. And if your opponent has no rearguards, your front row units gain 5,000 power. So basically, this order comes in 2 folds. The first fold is that Vermillion gets hard removal instead of soft removal. So if you're familiar with Spark Arrow Dragon, this is basically it. Vermillion has always had an issue binding because from his legacy in OG all the way through G, he was never allowed to bind. It was always stuff like Vanquisher. Then in V, they did a rewrite so Eradicators could bind as well. And at the end of V's lifespan, they gave Vermillion Spark Arrow Dragon so that he could bind as well. Now they're starting correctly on the right foot, giving Vermillion a bind, but tying it to an order. So from the bottom of my heart, Kidani, thank you for doing your research. It really just helps me a lot knowing that actual thought was put in this deck, as much as it's really bad. But it gets even worse because if your opponent chooses not to call, you can give your whole front row 5,000 power. It's good because it's free 5k. It's not like Gandiva stacking his magical crest. It's not like a crest, but I would say it is pretty good for what we have. And it gets better. This order card can be cast from the drop zone. And if you do, you bind it instead, which means that your 1 usage of Eternal Thunderbolt is now 2, because you're basically playing like Alchemagic. You can play it once in the drop zone, and then the next turn you can bind it by using it again. So it's really important that you actually know what this card does, because it makes or breaks Vermillion if you don't get it. Now, I'm playing this at 4 because it is highly important you see this every turn. Vermillion cannot do the direct damage if you do not play a normal order. And this is the normal order you want to play. It's not going to be cut. It's not going to be the Bastion plushie. No, it's going to be Vermillion Thunderbolt. So make sure that if you're playing this deck, get it right and play 4. People who tell you to play 3 or less are lying to you deliberately because they don't want you to get this as consistently. You want to make sure that every turn, anyone who faces down Vermillion is bound instead of retired. Moving on to our grade 2s, I mean the deck gets simpler from that. You'll see what I mean. We play 4 copies of Dragonic Death Scythe, we play 4 copies of Brachio Force, and then in the right deck we play 1 copy of Thunderstorm Dragoon. So yeah, let's begin. So Thunderstorm Dragoon, we covered him just now from the right deck. You can play more copies of him in this main deck, it's totally fine. I just choose not to because I don't really believe in an on-play Soul Charge plus 5, but I mean, if you like the Soul Charge, if you like the art, I say go ahead. It's good for this price point. And then we play Brachio Force. I'm going to make a meme from the future and say this, there is a chance Gandiva gets choice restricted with Brachio Force. Brachio Force, at the end of the battle that this unit attacks, if it hit, you choose one of your opponent's rearguards, retire it. When you retire this unit, and then you draw 1 card. A recurring cast member from Dragonic Overlord's Reign in Standard, if you can even call it a Reign, it's more like passive turn 2 aggression. Not turn 2, tier 2 aggression. Ouch. Yeah, it's nice to play this in Vermillion because Vermillion, besides Vermillion himself, does not really have much in the way of tackling an empty board. As you know, you want an empty board from the text of Eternal Thunderbolt. So what happens is now you can use Brachio Force to compete on the board early and retire anything that appears early before Vermillion, or even afterwards, because as long as Brachio Force's attack hits, you can retire itself and draw, which opens up a slot for Rising Phoenix. It is a interaction that, strangely, no one I've seen so far has talked about, but I think it's worthwhile mentioning because people stress that Rising Phoenix is broken or something because it can multi-attack, but then no one actually finds a way to clear the slot, which surprises me because I thought it was natural, right? I mean, it's like how you play for Bowman and Ezel, like, duh, but no one has brought this up, so I will, okay? It is a good card to play if you can't afford Brachio Force, like I said, you can just play stuff like Thunderstorm Dragoon. You can play the new triple rare from this set as well, the grade 2 girl that had her lore story. I think it's Latifah. Yeah, Latifah. But she's also pretty expensive too, so yeah, you really just have to play on a budget. I just think Brachio Force is the best option for cost and the way it melds very well with the Vermillion deck. But again, it's your call based on what you would like to play. There are options though, so don't feel despair. And then of course we have Dragonic Death Scythe. Dragonic Death Scythe is straight up the worst card in this deck, and I am going to explain why. I'm playing Dragonic Death Scythe out of pure necessity because he's a Narukami. He's someone that I really enjoy playing since OG. You know, his art's really kick-ass, he's a cool dragon. But in D series, he has completely let me down. During your turn, if your opponent has no front or rear guards, this unit gains 5,000 power. This first skill. I did not need another grade 2 15k attacker. In Dragon Empire, if I had a list of grade 2 10k attackers with a continuous red text to give them 5,000 power for unique condition, yeah, I could probably make an entire deck list out of one each. So I'm really confused why. I get that Death Scythe in V was similar to this, but this is just really lazy in my opinion. And it gets lazier because when he attacks, if your Vanguard is a grade 3 upgraded Narukami, you Soul Blast 2, you choose one of your opponent's rear guards and bind it, and if you don't, you draw. We need draw in this deck because it's very piece reliant, and my draw is locked behind a Soul Blast 2 that needs to find no target to bind. Why? Like, Ezreal gets CB1 draw 1 and I have to pay Soul Blast 2 to draw, and retiring the whole board. Now you get why I have to play stuff like Brachio Force, because Brachio Force just puts in all the work for me. He draws by refilling himself, and he can retire more rear guards with alongside Vermillion. You need the empty board, and Death Scythe is just not helping this problem. I don't know whether we will ever successfully get rid of the Grim Reaper himself, but man, I don't like Death Scythe, but he's in this deck, so whatever. Moving on to our grade 1s. Our grade 1s, we play 4 copies of Red River Dragoon with 1 in the right deck. We play 4 copies of Togachirashi. We play 4 copies of Rising Phoenix. The bird is indeed the word again. And of course, we play 4 perfect guards. So let me just run through this because it's actually pretty simple. We've covered Red River Dragoon already. You've seen Dragonic Death Scythe, so you know why we have a soul issue and why this is necessary. The same reason for Togachirashi. Togachirashi, when he's discarded during your turn, you throw him into your soul. Yay! And Vermillion already discards one, so I mean it's pretty obvious why you would pick up Togachirashi. He only has 1 printing though, so tough news. But there are other things you can play in this slot, but to me, I value that soul in really much, so just play him, yeah. And then with Rising Phoenix, the bird is indeed the word. Rising Phoenix is very similar to Death Scythe, a recurring class member of Narukami, but for some reason they've made his skill really bad. I'm gonna break it down for you though. When your opponent's rear guard is bound by a card effect, if your Vanguard's the Narukami, you can call this card to a rear guard circle. Okay, that's cool. At the cost of Soul Blast, you can call him back. Okay, and then you can, during the main phase, retire this unit and choose one of your rear guards and give it 5,000 power. Not rear guards, one of your units 5,000 power. I don't know if these people that wrote Rising Phoenix read my Dragonic Kaiser Vermillion, but I already go -1 to do your damage. I don't need to go -1 again to give a unit 5,000 power. What? Like, I get what this is for, is to set up Rising Phoenix in a job, but like, why? Come on, this is so bad. It's like, I have no words to explain. But it's not like Death Scythe kind of bad, where Death Scythe was like someone vomited in your face and then laughed at you. This guy is still pretty okay in the sense that, you know, you can tell what they were. You could tell what they were going for, but like realistically, no, it's just not good. But you know what? He's still a Narukami. He's still an occasional free recursion, especially because Vermillion games, when they stretch out, you really get tight on resources and rear guards. You know, so it's nice to have a recursion. It's always nice to have recursion since V Rising Phoenix, but like. I don't know whether this is for balancing reasons or just because, you know, it's common, but whatever. It's still something you would play in Vermillion. Maybe if you get future support, you wouldn't have to play Rising Phoenix as well, but unlike Death Scythe, I actually appreciate it when I see my Rising Phoenixes. And then, of course, we play for perfect guards, yeah. Last but not least, our grade zeros. We obviously play Spark Kid Dragoon, favorite starter. And then we play 8 critical triggers because we want to kill the opponent. We have very low resources. We play 4 regular heals because we don't want to bet on a certain matchup. 3 effect draws and a Drunk Veda because we want to restand the Vanguard. Although both skills of Vermillion are once per turn, it is still pretty nice to have an additional Vanguard attack. You know, more drives is nice. And yeah, that pretty much wraps up my Dragonic Kaiser Vermillion deck profile. Yeah, I will say it again, this deck is not very good. I mean, when was the last time I said a Vermillion deck was good? Vermillion has never been good, but you know what? I'm still really happy from the bottom of my heart that he's back, because it's still Narukami, it's still my favorite card. I'm just really grateful. I know that there are a lot of things out there in the meta that will pose a challenge to Vermillion. I know people are hyping Vermillion up as a counter to Eva. As someone who has been able to play Vermillion here and there, I disagree with both statements. I feel that Vermillion, if you practice it, if you really try to play around the few strengths that it has, it can be pretty fun and entertaining. But on the other hand, Vermillion versus stuff like Eva is pretty hard because stuff like Eva has not just so much support, but so much dedicated players. People say it's the expression of skill. People are saying this is the best deck in the format. You know, you get free multi-attacks, 6 crits out of nowhere, you know, deck filtering for days, and I get it. So Blast 2 to draw 1. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like and share, because I really want to, you know, talk about Vermillion. I really like this deck a lot. These are actually my first frame rares, you know, in this series. So, you know, I managed to buy them, and they look really nice. But you know what? The Scythe, I sincerely hate you as a card. I hope you are removed from this deck. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.